Hello and welcome to this week's Our Game Show. Delighted to be brought to you once again by Lateral Land, and I'm delighted to be in the company what we described, Michael, as an Offaly love-in, here with former Offaly Dual Star and former chairman of the Offaly County Board, Michael Duignan. How are you?
I'm good, Michael. Yeah, not a bother. I don't think it's a love-in anyway, Mike, whatever it is. So. Riding us on board. We still have history.
It's a good type of history, in fairness. There'd usually be heads cut off on the pitch, but it'd be fair enough after that, and they'd usually sit down in Malays for a pint together or whatever it was.
That's it, Malays or Nolans or Sids or wherever we were. Yeah, great friends in Borside. No, and great times.
We're going to be looking ahead to what is a bumper weekend of hurling action. 2 massive league finals down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and obviously lots of football to get through with Adam later in the show. But Michael, it's a sad day for the GAA, sad day for Irish sport, I would say, as well, with the passing of Miko O'Dwyer at the age of 88. Like, would you have had many meetings with Miko down through the years? Like, what a larger-than-life character. Brought success everywhere he went. Great times in Kerry, obviously. We're happy enough that we ended there 5 in a row, but they got another 3 after. Great times in Wicklow, Kildare, Laois, and lastly with Clare as well. A sad day for the GAA.
Yeah, it is indeed, Michael. Look, I suppose the word legend is thrown around, but he was, look, as a player, if you look at his record, first of all, he had an outstanding career with Kerry, and then his management career, I suppose, is really second to none. It's up there with the very best with the Brian Codys and Jim Gavins and I suppose, look, Mickey Hart's had a great career, but I suppose Cody, Gavin and Micko would be at the top of the pile in terms of All Ireland titles. And I did look and pass on my condolences obviously to all the family. Ireland is a small country, Michael, as you find out after a while, and when you're involved in the GAA and I suppose in business and everything else and live in different places, you get to know an awful lot of different people. So over the years I got to know a lot of that great Kerry team of the 70s and 80s very well through socialising and golf. I didn't play at the same time as them, and I also got to know Micko through maybe that, but when he was with Kildare, I was living in Naas that time, and we obviously won the All-Ireland in 98, and Kildare were beaten by Galway on the same day. They won Leinster, and then they won again in 2000. So I was in Naas at that time. My 2 sons were born in Naas. We were born in Dublin, but we were living in Naas. So we had a certain amount of affinity to Kildare, I suppose, and I knew a lot of the players at that time. We were the same vintage, obviously. I'm still very friendly with a lot of them to this day. So I got to know Micko probably really well at that stage. I used to meet him quite a bit around. He stayed up around Naas and in Kill a lot. And when I finished up playing, I went into management straight away, almost with the Meath Hurlers in 2001. And Micko offered me some very, very good and sage advice at the time. And he was a brilliant character. He was a rogue and great fun, as well as obviously being a master of Gaelic football. But he was great company and great crack. So I met him up and down over a number of years. And I think the last time I met him was a few years ago. I was going to an Offaly minor hurling match in Portlaoise. It could be 6 or 7 years ago since I met him last. But over a period of a number of years, I knew him very well. And a sad day, he's left a massive imprint. And he's Micko. That's all he is. And I think the 82 one always stung with him because like the 5 in a row hadn't been done by them, and they really wanted to do that. But I think that's long forgotten now. And the great players that played under him, a number of them are gone as well. So like that's life. But he's had a long life, and he's left a massive imprint in Irish life.
Yeah, I think even up to 10 years ago, I think he was still involved with an under-14 team down in Waterford. Like that's the legacy he's left. He called it an addiction he had to football. He said he couldn't get away from it. He couldn't stop watching it. I think he said a few years ago in that great Miko documentary on RTE that he would be nearly happiest if he died on the sideline or during a game or something like that. It was such a massive part in his life. And he's touched so many players across the country. And as you say, when you're known by 5 letters and Micko, and you said Micko anywhere around the country, and people know who you're talking about, you have a legendary status. So deepest condolences to the O'Dwyer family, and we'll be paying tribute with Adam Moynihan later on as well, paying more tribute to Micko and remembering some of his kind of greatest feats and things throughout his managerial career and his playing career. But Michael, from a hurling front, very exciting weekend from an Offaly point of view, obviously, but very exciting weekend from a hurling point of view as well. 2 big finals down the park. First and foremost, I presume you have a ticket. I presume you were one of the few that were able to get your hands on one.
Well, I think Brian got a couple as a player, so the team. So I did. I managed to squeeze into it. Yeah, the huge demand, obviously, Michael, and it's caused quite a bit of controversy, obviously, over the last week or so. So look, our I suppose, to be honest about it, the GAA did approach us the week before if had we an issue if it did go. I think they were looking at maybe Limerick if it was Galway and Limerick, and if it was Cork and Tip, there was a chance that they were looking at Cork because of Tip and Cork having an arrangement there. So we consulted with the team management, who consulted with the players, and they were very anxious to play as part of that doubleheader rather than play maybe the day before in a standalone fixture, which would have still been a big occasion. And look, we also thought about the Saturday because it would have given her maybe 100 or 220 players that will be playing an extra day because of Tuesday night playing Galway. But at the end of the day, the overriding desire of the players was to play in a full Páirc Uí Chaoimh. You don't get too many opportunities, in modern time Offaly hurling to have days like that. And as you've heard me say many times, you're fed up with it, but the player is number one to us, and putting the player and what they want to do and what their opinion is, not at all costs, but when we can. And they were really anxious. So we agreed that. And the only disappointment we had was on the Monday, we only got word of the fixture at lunchtime. And we only got an email at 21 minutes past 4 that the tickets were going on sale at 4:30. And ironically, that was the same with Tip and Waterford. Cork are saying it was the same with them. I don't think it was. I think they had a heads up, and it backfired really on them as well, because the demand is so high. Cork probably would have sold 60 or 70,000 tickets, particularly would have been in Cork. And like, people have to keep a perspective on these things. Like last year, there was 2 All-Ireland quarterfinals played in Thurles, including Cork. Cork, who were the 4 counties? Cork, Wexford, Clare, and Dublin. There was 30,000 people at it.
Yeah.
20, but when it's in Cork, and if it was in Croke Park, there mightn't be 46,000 there. That's my opinion. And there's a lot of league matches that you've been at and I've been at, with Waterford and Offaly and Tip, where you might get 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. So it's like one of those things when you can't get a ticket. I would have been there. It would have been the 100,000 sort of. The Croke Park would have been full, but wouldn't it have been? So there's all sorts of ways of looking at it. At the end of the day, my view on all these things always has been, usually whoever wants to be there will get there. And we did, without going into every puck of the ball, we did raise our concerns very strongly with Croke Park. We did get some tickets. We only could allocate 10 or 12 per club. We have obviously sponsors, etc. But we're fairly happy that a lot of people have been facilitated, and I didn't take a huge volume of calls, a few calls, very good supporters, and we try to look after everyone as we always try to do.
Yeah, just we'll come to Offaly and Waterford in a minute, Mike, but just from a Division 1A point of view, like it's almost like the trophies some of them have been handed to Cork already at this stage with some of the talk. Dangerous talk, I would say, at this time of the year, considering there's not them one. They are the farm team at the minute, but geez, it's we're going to have to pass the goods of 16, 17, 18 weeks before Liam McCarthy's handed out, and a couple of other trophies along the way. What have you made of that kind of narrative almost? They're joint favourites for the All-Ireland already.
Yeah, well, look, they're obviously operating at a huge level, and they lost the All-Ireland last year by a puck of the ball by 1 point, and you can go through every decision of the game, but really, there was a free at the end, maybe a draw was the fair, you never know again, all that sort of thing. But to take your bigger point, I suppose, at the start of the league, I did a preview, and I said the 2 teams the league meant the most, it was Tip and Cork. Tip because, in my view, they had lost the support of their county, of their supporters. They weren't in a good spot. Through a variety of reasons, they lost an awful lot of good players. And to be fair to Liam Cahill and his management team, they probably had to stay loyal year one to a lot of lads. They had a huge amount of players kind of coming to the end of their careers that were legendary players, and that's never easy, and it was going to take time. But then last year, obviously, and they're saying this very honestly, I think Liam Cahill, see Jake Morris during the week, it wasn't acceptable to Tipperary public. So I felt they needed a huge league. And then Cork, I think this drought, from 98 since the league, 2005 since an All-Ireland, that has to be ended. And obviously the more years that pass, we saw that with Galway with the big gap, it puts more and more pressure on people and on players. So I felt that was the issue, or was the state of play at the start of the league, and now these 2 teams have ended up in the league final, which I'm not surprised by. I think other teams have other fish to fry. as far as what you're saying, I agree totally. I know as a player, and you do as well, Michael, it is very, very, very hard to peak. When it's now with the split season, peak in April, early April, and peak again in June. In our time, like we only won one National League, and we were in a lot of finals throughout the 90s. But to be really good towards the end of the league and to be really good in the knockout stages of the championship. And there's a fine line in Munster because it's so competitive. You could be out in a flash, lose a couple of matches. So you're trying to balance that. And we've seen Limerick, I suppose, approaching it different ways over their great spell, where they've gone all out for the league, when they felt it was important, and then other years they've taken a back foot. I'm not sure they've done that this year. I think there's a transition there, and maybe there's a hunger to be reinstated. There's different issues. But from a Cork point of view, it is dangerous. It is hard to stay going. But at the moment, all you can look at them is on form, and they're really enjoying their hurling. Their movement, their pace, their athleticism, their striking ability, and the energy that they have. And I suppose, look, like Patrick Horgan, who last year after the Ireland final, people were saying, well, he pulled a hamstring and should he have been taken off, and should it, like, his performance the last day against Galway was arguably as good as he's ever played for Cork. If you use him I know we're always talking about him as a barometer. So I think they're in a very, very good place. They have a very, very strong panel. They probably haven't. We don't know what their strongest 15 is, or even if Pat Ryan knows, but they certainly have that 20 players. They know that they have 5 really good subs no matter what team they start. So they're in a great spot. But Tipperary really have nothing to lose. I think on Sunday they're kind of been written off for the final, and that's a great incentive to them. They've played with great hunger and passion throughout the league. But as far as the championship goes, it's hard now. You've only 2 weeks to the Munster Championship, and Clare are waiting, Limerick are waiting, and Waterford obviously are building and have had they're obviously at a different level for the last number of years, but they're going to be dangerous enough opponents, I think, for a lot of teams as well. So it'll be a long summer yet, and there will be twists and turns.
From a Tip point of view, Michael, their next 4 weeks they're playing Cork, Limerick, and Cork. So I think Sunday is so important that whatever about winning would be a massive bonus, but just being really competitive, going toe to toe, not conceding 4 or 5 goals, not been beaten by double digits, because I know that they weren't beaten by that much in the league semi-final last year, but the wheels came off a small bit after. They need to keep the foot to the floor here. Can't really afford to throw in a bad performance, and then all of a sudden confidence is down, and Limerick are coming to town 2 weeks later.
I agree with you, and I think that they've moved players into new positions kind of throughout the team, and they need to go well. If that falls apart, say on Sunday, like you saw Galway get the conceding 5 goals the last day, like they have plenty of time to fix that, and to look at that. But if that was to happen to Tip or something like that, so I think the likes of Owen Connolly at fullback, and there's loads more of that. They've been very consistent in terms of their selection. So they'd love to see sort of those central positions. Ronan Maher has been brilliant at centre back throughout the league, but they'll be trying to move him all over the place. We know what Shane Barrett does. So you have that, and you have the youth that they brought into the team as well, and they're balancing the under 20 as well, no more than we'll be doing in Offaly. So they have those issues to contend with as well over the next number of weeks. But I'm expecting a big spirited display, and whether the win or lose, as you say, that they can come out of the league and say we've made changes, we've instilled spirit, we've brought energy, and we've brought drive, and we've passion back into Jersey. And if they come out of Páirc Uí Chaoimh with that intact on Sunday evening, they'll be happy. Just
from a Cork point of view, Michael, everyone, it's all kind of rosy at the minute. I kind of still think they're not the complete package, and there are a few areas potentially that you can get at them. Where are potential weaknesses? Because they're not the full package yet, and they won't be the full package until they win All Ireland, and they might even be the full package if they do win All Ireland. But are there any areas that you'd be looking at and thinking, oh, this still isn't perfect, or where could Tip get at them, and maybe where could teams get at them in Munster?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose you can go through every line, really, if you want. Like, their 2 cornerbacks have been playing brilliantly throughout the league. The 2 downies bedded down 3 and 6, but they're still very young and inexperienced, and they're going to make a few mistakes, particularly at 3. Mark Coleman has, his form has been up and down a little bit at 7. He's been targeted maybe in the air quite a bit by teams. Their half forward line, a little bit unsettled. Seamus Harnedy has been such a warrior for them over the years, but he's not getting any younger. They've been making changes. They're the places, You know, Shane Barrett, very, very effective when he's on his game, but can drift in and out of games. We saw that in the All-Ireland final. Brilliant start last year, but then maybe went out again with John Conlon. Like when you get to this cutthroat knockout championship games, you know, it's different than every other game. So, you know, Ethan Toomey has been there a wing forward. Will he be there in the championship? Lads getting runs coming in. Mickey O'Connell coming in there for a game or two.
No, you're thinking of Mickey back in the day,
Mickey,
Michael.
father, yeah. Mihal, I should say. It's Mihal. I played against Mickey in the minor final in '86. Jesus, a long time ago now. He actually played in both minor finals that year. Galway bet him in the minor football as well. But anyway, it's not a history lesson. So I suppose that's the thing, is when they settle under best 15, and we know I've said it as a positive that they have the 20 players, but still you want to be going out, like, you don't go out with the thing of taking off players. You know, you will make changes, players that, but I suppose it's that half forward line, half back line. Like Dara Fitzgibbon is obviously, he's 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 every day. Like he's a serious machine in the middle of the field. Tim O'Mahony has been brilliant throughout the league as well. So that midfield looks rock solid. And then it's sort of 5 to 12 inside. Then Hoggy, look, you know, Brian Hayes is out injured. Alan Connolly hasn't seen much game time, whereas early last year he was on fire. His form has dipped a bit. So look, that can happen, and that's back to your original point: is to keep players at their peak throughout that summer period. And you know, we've seen, I suppose, Limerick being brilliant at that, just scraping through Munster maybe, and then building from there. So like there is a huge high around Cork hurling at the minute. Like the build up is massive. I think they are a very, very good side, and I love watching them play. And I have to say that I love the way they play the game. It's all go, it's all action, and we'll go to outscore you. And that's a positive. Limerick have been at that for a number of years as well. Like 30 points is sort of the goal going out, and if you can score more than that, well, best of luck to you.
Just on Cork's kind of starting 15, and I suppose bedding down a 15. I mean, even thinking throughout your own Offaly career, particularly 94 to say the guts of 2000, you kind of knew 11, 12, 13 spots in the team the whole time, really. And maybe a cornerback comes in, maybe a half forward, maybe a corner forward. But generally, it was the same guys. And there's something very solid in that as well, is that knowing where everyone is going to be, building up that chemistry over years as well. Cork are getting there, I'd say, but they don't probably quite have that yet because there's so many new lads in the last year or two.
Yeah, and there's a fine line in that, Michael, I suppose, in terms of introducing new players and not all leaving at the same time. You know, it's happened in different counties, you know, but it's very hard for managers. Like Liam Sheedy was criticised for this with Tipperary when he came back, that he was very loyal to the older players. But had he got better players in the county at the time than him? No, he hadn't. It was probably the same with a lot of us, you know, when we got into our early 30s, you know, we were still there on form, and there is a great comfort. Like there is no doubt. You're right. I'd say it was probably 13, 14 positions most days. It was down to maybe then 1 or 2 lads form and trend or whatever. But you know, even if some lads weren't playing that great in trend, they were going to be on because they were proven at the highest level and proven on the big day. Yeah, so I'd agree with you. Like it's a relatively new Cork team still, you know, and as I say, like the two Downies sort of, not that they came out of nowhere, but like at the start of last year, there was no one seeing the two of them having the seasons they had and nailing down 3 and 6 on the Cork.
Well, Rob wasn't a centre back until Kieran Joyce got injured. It's gas, you know. Exactly.
I was going to say that Kieran Joyce would have been mapped out for the next 10 years as their centre back, and then Rob came in there. But at 20, 21 years of age to go in full back, you know, is a tough thing to do in the modern game at any time, I suppose, at 3. But there's not much cover anymore, you know, in terms of the way the game has changed back again, where we're gone away totally nearly from the sweeper system. There's still lads obviously back and back. It's back maybe to the 90s a little bit in terms of the way lads are moving, or the half forward lines are retreating, etc.
That must make you very happy, I'd imagine.
It does. Well, I always argued you're entitled to go out and play any way you want to play, and depends on the development of your team. But it's really a damage limitation exercise, because you cannot win playing like that. That's always been my view. I haven't had issues with certain teams over the years, because if you're starting out and you're trying to build confidence in a team, you know, There was one Munster final I was at in our semi-final in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, Tip and Waterford, and Tip scored 7 goals, I think, that day.
Yeah, 2011 Munster final, I think. Yeah.
And you know, and I think when I don't know, did Derry come in after that, or was I'm not sure now, but whoever came in, it might have been before Davy's time or Davy came in after. I'm not sure now, but then they went very defensive after that, and that's fair enough maybe for a year or so, because that's after happening to you, and you have to say, right, we'll develop a game, a running game. We could make sure we have plenty of cover at the back, but the good teams just pick you off then from distance as well. But that's a different thing. But I've never managed at that level. But you can have a view on it. But I suppose you have to look at the players you have and how they can play and how they can adapt, and like the speed of lads on the pace of the game. But I love it. I have to say, like I am loving it, and I'm really looking forward, to this year's championship again. Like Munster is obviously ultra competitive, and Leinster is always kind of written off a little bit below that. But you don't know, there is a bit of team building going on in Galway in particular, I think, and Kilkenny have a couple of injuries, but it's still going to be cutthroat.
Are you blown away by the levels hurling is at the minute? Like when you see, I know you were obviously in for the All-Ireland final, we'd say last year, but even other games, like the speed of it, the skill of it, if you dwell for even a nanosecond on a ball, you're swallowed up. If your touch is in any way off, it's the pace of it is unbelievable at the minute.
Yeah, I'm probably not, because I'm so involved in it. I suppose on the commentary side, I'm always close to it, and you can see the improvements, and some of them are very year on year. They're marginal. Like you go back to the great hurling we had it in 9 and 10, and that we thought that would never be passed. And the game evolves, but it's linked into what's going on behind the scenes, with the level of training, with the commitment of management teams. Like the analysis that goes into it, the S&C, the nutrition, the medical support. Like it's brilliant. And once we can fund it and pay for it all, it's brilliant for the players to be operating in that, because they put so much into it. It's brilliant to see them getting, like, it's so enjoyable for them. Their training is so enjoyable. The sessions, when, like, compared to what we did, like jumping out of the car. I was coming from Dublin. I see Brian now coming from Dublin. He's a teacher, so he's off that bit earlier, but he's down, and they're in. Like, he could have an hour done in the field before training even starts. Like, they're there all there early, and then they're out in the field doing it. Then they come back in and they do a bit of analysis of prehab and everything. Before they could be there together for an hour and a half before training even starts, doing different bits and pieces, and they love it. And you'd have to love it, to be fair, because you're putting a lot into it. But I think when you have that sort of support around the whole thing, and that sort of knowledge base, because like we were a lot of times saying we weren't sure why we were doing training, this type of training or that type of training, but everything now is and everything is looked after, so that allows then for the players then to be prepared mentally and physically to the standard they are. And then obviously even down to the hurls and the slitters are lighter and everything else, all that stuff, to better quality, bigger bosses on the hurls, hit the ball further. So it's all part of it, but but even underage matches, like the skill level of players is off the charts, and it's just a testimony to the work they're putting in.
Yeah. How do you think your crew would adapt to the modern style? Like, someone tried to debate with me about whether Brian Whelan would still be as good as he was if he was playing now, and I kind of said, yeah, he mightn't have cleared the ball 100 yards, but I guarantee he'd put the ball 40, 50 yards down the lad's throat. Like, I just think great players would adapt regardless. I wonder what the commitment that's needed now, would your boys have just naturally adapted to that, do you reckon?
Look, I think it's all relative. I think you would, if you're a part of it. Our commitment was probably a lot better than people thought, in terms of doing what you had to do at the time. But like, it wasn't very scientific. Now, as the career went on, I started in '86 and I finished in 2001. By the time I finished, it obviously had improved a fair bit in terms of what was happening and going on. But it's nano years behind us. And I would agree with you totally. I would say the likes of Brian Whelan would be way better if he had that sort of preparation, because he was so good. Like the boss of Brian Whelan's hurl wouldn't be half the size of a modern boss. Have you seen them? Ever seen them?
Tiny, like, it's actually hard to believe he hurled.
Like, it's like Brian Gatt, who made his hurls up. Brian Gatt has one up there still, like, and it's unbelievable, like the control and skill him and John Tryon, these people had. Johnny Dooley's striking just off our team and right across the country. So if you add all those things in that I'm talking about, I can guarantee you the great players from our time would be better than they were. But and then it's a matter. The athleticism is the big thing. So if you weren't a natural athlete at a high level, like I say that quite a bit now about young players, and you write off nobody. There's a place for everybody, but this balance, the skill is so important. But if you don't have the athleticism, no matter all the skill in the world at the very highest level, and you'll see that the little step down. That's always been the way, I suppose. That even the great club player just didn't make it at county level. But the great club player nowadays, the reason it'll be a yard of pace, it won't be because of his hurling. But the pace of the game, as you said it, and a split second that is gone and it's over. It's a goal. And that's the big change. But I think the great players would always have been great players. And you can go back to the Christy Rings and Eddie Cares and all those. I guarantee you that if they were prepared the way lads are prepared now, they'd be just as good.
Yeah, just to put a bow on that Division 1A final, Mike, any particular matchup you're looking forward to, and how do you see it going in the heat of the hunt?
The matchup, I think around the middle of the field. I think that sort of the sort of energy that Craig Morgan has brought to the middle of the field. Like that's been a big move. Like I've only known him as a sort of cornerback, maybe wing back. Maybe Alan Tynan with him there, who's very aggressive and strong against the two very proven Cork guys who can score and set up, and Dara is on the run the whole time. I think that'll have so you maybe see Craig Morgan picking up Dara Fitzgibbon, but he has the athleticism to cause damage down the other end. I've been really impressed the couple of matches I've seen him and I've commentated on. I think Cork are worthy favourites just on overall form and the scoring rate that they're putting up. But I have been really impressed with the way Tip have bounced back. They were under a lot of pressure at the start of the league, and I think Liam Cahill is starting to really make his mark on the team, bringing in players that he knew, from maybe underage as well. And he's been brave with the likes of Darren McCarthy, who's bringing him in at his age and put him on the freeze straight away and all that. He showed a great trust in a young player like that. So probably Cork are probably just a little bit further ahead at the moment, but I'd be expecting Tip to be very competitive with Cork to win maybe by 3 or 4 points.
Yeah, should be an absolute belter of a game. Hopefully, I'm hoping for Sunday's sake it's tight, but also for Munster and even for Tip's sake going into Munster. Wouldn't you love if, say, Cork won after extra time or whatever it was, and you know what I mean, and you have two teams coming in serious form coming into Munster. It's going to be very, very interesting. The curtain raiser, Michael, obviously we both have plenty of skin in the game there. First things first, how do you find it watching your own young fella hurling? Are you poking every ball? Are you nervous beforehand? How do you find that process?
It is. Look, I'll tell you the truth. It's not easy. Even though he's very calm, self, and he's well established and all that. But he's in Dublin, but he's at home all the time, at home at the weekends and matches and all that. So, good few lads around, obviously, beside us at home, and the lads have their routine, like the Ravenhills and Kieran Burke and Mark Troy and the two Sam and Dan Burke and Jack Fogarty. There's 8 on the panel. They all live on the kind of road out in the middle of nowhere, as you know, out in Durrow. Between Kilbeggan and Tullamore. So it's great.
I tell you that, it's a fair hurling hotbed now.
Yeah, no, they did. Look, again, it's developed over the years and it's great. But look, to answer your question, I've been with him, I suppose, with teams all the way up along, and Sean, the older lad, when he was hurling underage before he sort of went another direction, you would be that little bit more conscious. But I didn't find it as bad when I was on the line with them growing through. We won a couple of minors, won an under 20 and all that. They're just one of the team. I always treated them, I probably treated them a bit harder when they were younger, but I realised then that, look, they're just part of the squad. So I'm back involved with the club this year as well. And we only started back with a league match last night, but I'll be dealing with him in the club as well. So I think that'll be easier. And I was back last year for a few weeks before the county final. It's just when you're in the crowd as a parent, I suppose that's how you're watching the match then. And he's taken the freeze now as well this year with Owen Cahill has been injured and Adam has been injured. So he's kind of taken over the freeze. So you're just hoping he goes well like any other parent, and he does well. And I wouldn't be too bad. I'm a long time around the game, and I'd be kind of hoping for them all that they do well and Offaly do well, because even last year against Cork, which the year before Tip had hammered us in that sort of preliminary quarter final after we lost to John McDonough. And you don't want to go there again. And they put up a very credible performance against Cork last year. You don't go out to put up credible performance, but you have to be realistic about where you are and where we're trying to get to. So I was delighted for them, even though they were beaten, that they competed really well that day, and and that the progress they've made. And I think, I've said this, that all the teams that in Offaly over the last, say during my term as chairman and moved on now, we've made great strides. But I think that senior hurling team, like, to go from where they were in the Christian Ring, I think we were, in my view, and I've said this, that we were nearly extinct. We were nearly gone. I'm not sure there was that many people wanted to play hurling for Offaly down in the Christie Ring, looking at the fixtures we had and the places we were going, the matches we had. And these group of lads, a lot of them were in 19, Brian was 19 when he went in there, and Ross Reynolds, Borky, 19, 20, 21. There was, in fairness to the established lads, the David Kings, the Ben Keneallys, the Jason Sampsons, the Owen Cahills, they were further up the road. They all stayed, and the lads came in, and they really had a long, hard journey. And, and I've seen it firsthand where they've come from, mentally, physically, emotionally, every way. And like, we still have a long way to go. We all know that. But they're probably the group that I would admire the most in terms of where they've ended up back in. And a huge few weeks ahead now. Whatever about the league final, trying to stay in Leinster was going to be so difficult, and it's so important. So there's huge pressure on them again. There was huge pressure on them last year to win the Joe Mac. There was huge pressure on the year before, and they couldn't win it. Couldn't win the Christie Ring the first year. Like, this has been a very, very difficult journey. And these lads have stayed at it. And these under-20s coming in now are beginning to come in, has given them another lift. So it's been good.
That perseverance, Michael, as well. It's very easy for lads to walk away. Like, I would have unbelievable respect for anybody that goes in. But for lads that stay going, particularly through, like, I can't imagine how they felt when Down beat them in the Christie Ring semi-final in 2020. And everything seemed miles away as well. That perseverance is great. And you mix in all the young lads with those lads that have seen a lot, like, in the last 5 or 6 years. There's a nice little blend there now.
Yeah, there is. I remember that Down match was during COVID, and we lost in penalties, and Brian actually took one and missed it, and he was only, that's whatever year, he was 19, I'd say 19 or 20, and we drove home on our own that evening. It was a long drive home, and they're the days. Like, I wouldn't be hard on them after matches or anything like that. I played enough matches myself and played, I'd say you play an odd good match, you play a lot of bad matches as well. Once you're doing your best. But they did, and look, no more than we're sort of seeing with the footballers now. Like, a lot of those under 20 players have had setbacks over the last couple of years, and they kept at it, and now they're beginning to find their feet. And it's one thing I'd say, I'd be maybe the most proud of, that we created a culture that nobody walked away. Like, that players had. Now, we wouldn't say nobody walked away. There was a bit of an issue maybe with a few lads going off after the league football and going away for the summer, that type of thing. But on the hurling front, I think once we got going, nobody left, and it was a matter of managing lads out and managing better players in along along the way. So look, I suppose it happens in in the bigger counties, and when we were going well, it wasn't a big, it's much easier to give that effort, to give that commitment, when you have a chance of winning silverware, which we nearly had for 10 or 12 years in a row. We were thereabouts every single year at the top of your game with a panel of players to back it up. So anywhere around the country, you can see that. That's what happens. Teams might get a good year or 2 or 3 and then they fall again, in a lot of counties. So we're hoping we're building something that we might be able to, stay at a decent level for a while.
Sustainability, that's what it's all about. It'd be great. And not being smart, Michael, as well, from an Offaly supporters point of view. Like, we all kind of live in hope now as well, and just hope. Some people say, just hope is the thing that'll kill you or whatever, and dreaming or whatever. But just, I don't know, like, particularly after the 20 All-Ireland last year, hope is just coursing through your veins that, okay, it's probably not going to happen, this year or next year, but it could happen. Johnny Pilkington tells me it'll definitely happen before 2030 anyway.
Yeah, it's very good of him to put that out there. So typical Johnny, put another target on people's backs. But he's right to be ambitious. You have to sort of believe it, whether he was or not. Johnny as well as I do, so it could have been tongue-in-cheek. He might believe it. I think he does. I think he has huge belief. And he's right. These 20s are better than we ever were. A lot of them, in terms of the skill and everything else. But they have to develop all those other things we've talked about there. The physicality, the athleticism, the strength and condition, which we're helping them with, and they will grow and get stronger, and that's going to take time. But I think by the time they get to sort of 22 or 3, the lads I've been talking about there, a lot of them will be 28 or 9.
Yeah.
So we should have a very good blend. But the thing is that lads stay with it, and that's why a relegation would be so serious in terms of a dent. And I think at this stage it's one of the things we won't get into detail now, but I've spoken at a higher level about this, is maybe expanding the Leinster Championship a little bit, because this yo-yo with Carlow and Laois and Westmeath and Offaly is not helping. And I think there's a way of looking at maybe a couple of more teams at least in Leinster, and a different sort of format. The stronger teams will still come out and qualify and go on, but it'll give the other teams more life. I think it might be just Joe McDonagh has done a great job, but it might be a time to have another look at things again now in terms of the teams that have made progress. They're trying to keep them at that level.
It is a disaster if you get up to the Leinster. I mean, thinking from Carlow's point of view, the greatest result in their history probably last year, drawing with Kilkenny, and a week later they were relegated down to the second tier again. So where's your opportunity kind of to build on? Even remember Neil McMahon saying to me before, even if there was a buffer for a year, once you go up, that you've played at that level, got exposed to it, your squad has kind of got tried and tested. You're kind of just you're taking one step forward and two steps back a bit, aren't you?
Well, you see, Michael, the thing is, it's a 2-year cycle at best. It's not 1 year, because you have to go and try to win the Joe McDonagh the following year. So you're looking at a player that's maybe, say in Offaly's case, spent 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years now battling very, very hard to get there. And then you go down again and they're saying, am I going to stay around? They haven't travelled to Australia. They haven't done, the whatever. They haven't been away for a summer. They haven't done anything. All of a sudden you say, I'm going to take this year out, or I'm going to do this, which is a very human thing. And nobody is owned by the GAA. And that's what happens. And that's why teams dip then. And then when you dip, trying to get back again is the thing. So, and look, people will say I'm only saying this now because Offaly are back up, but I think Carlow is a massive example. I think Laois just before that, when Eddie Brennan was there in particular, Westmeath have been thereabouts. They're probably building a little bit again now. But like if there was two of those four up there, and Antrim now maybe are a little bit of a change as well. So you're going to have Kilkenny, Galway, Wexford, and Wexford very close to going down, but I think they're better than that. And Dublin, and if you had four more with them, you could format a championship around that in a certain way, and I think it'd be competitive. I think Carlow last year, like we've been involved with so many battles with Carlow. We drew with them in the league this year. They beat us 2 years ago in a Joe Mac final. They're a very, very good side, and they're probably forwards in particular that are as good as anybody's around.
There's a comment in here, just says Paul Young, fair play to you, Michael, on the job you've done with Offaly. Joe Mac winners should stay up for 2 years. Well, that's an interesting one, in that maybe forget about the preliminary All-Ireland quarter-final and give them a bit of safety maybe, or something like that. Just something I wanted to ask you, Michael. We're obviously Offaly are missing James Matton at the weekend, which is a big loss, obviously, because he's been brilliant throughout the league. Kind of, he's nailed down that spot, cornerback. What have you made of the kind of push on the head-high tackles, and then some lads maybe been punished with red cards for tackles that are not maybe making contact to the head? And there's also, like, it probably hasn't been spoken about much, there's the possibility of somebody being sent off between the four teams on Sunday through something like that, and then missing the first round of the championship. And it's funny that the teams that are in the final could be punished almost by losing someone for the first round of the championship by virtue of getting to a final. But what have you made of, let's say, all the red mist that has descended throughout the league?
Yeah, I'd say for one thing first, I would be a massive advocate of protecting the player from that serious aggressive head-high tackle, because the power of the lads now is massive, and you could really hurt somebody. And I think where this came to life was that Conor Cooney tackle, which was a red card. Okay, there's no arguing with that. And I think we have to be very strong on those, aggressive head-high tackles. Then you have to be very careful then after that in terms of your interpretation. You mentioned there about somebody, it mightn't have been much talk about it, and there hasn't been in the media maybe about somebody missing the match, but I can guarantee you it's a massive bone or a massive issue with teams preparing for the final.
Yeah,
I know that the Offaly management have spent a lot of time with the players. And look, I have to admit to you, I was very, very irate about James Mahon's situation, and I still am. And I even spoke to Jarlath Burns again last night, and it's nothing to do with Jarlath Burns. It's no more than when I was chair of Offaly. I've nothing to do with the CCC. But we have to be getting these things right. And I felt James Mahon's tackle wasn't even a yellow card. And He's 19 years of age and he's getting all this attention all over the place that young fella does not need. He's a quiet, unassuming country fella, and I think he's been forgotten about in this, and that's what's made me. And I've spoken to James. I prepared his defence with him last. Do you swear he was a criminal last Tuesday for his here last Thursday? I'm still the liaison between the county board and the senior hurling football and under 20 hurlers or whatever I needed. And I think in my 5 years, we never appealed the red card. We didn't have that many. In my career, I was sent off once. It wasn't appealed. I was sent off in the line a couple of times. They weren't appealed because they were deserved.
Yeah.
But this wasn't. And I thought it was a massive opportunity for Johnny Murphy and Sean Stack. People can argue who did it or who said it. I don't know what the communication was. There was a massive opportunity for two grown men to go home on Sunday night, look at that and say, lads, we got this wrong. Put up their hands. And I think the respect the referees and linesmen would have transformed the whole summer.
But sure, Michael, when somebody makes a mistake, I have no issue with people making a mistake if they put their hands up and say it. I'm sure you're the same. Like, and if you make a mistake and you come to me and say, listen, hands up, I made a mistake there, it was wrong or whatever, and I'd be like, sure, what can you do? Like, someone's admitted they're wrong. Do you know what I mean?
But see, we all make mistakes, and I might have made mistakes. I'm very angry about this, and I have been, and I've spoken to a number of people, maybe a little bit harshly in the GAA that mightn't have anything to do with it. I might have to put my hands up myself in the next few days when I reflect on it all. But that to me is not acceptable. It's not an acceptable disciplinary procedure when it's clearly not a red card. There's nobody that I've known, I've spoken to, has said to me it was a red card. Nobody. Or I haven't seen anybody saying it in any comments anywhere. So he had a hearing and he gave his side of the story, and the county secretary was on. I wasn't on the hearing call, and to just listen to him, and then just said, okay, we'll come back to you. Like, nobody asked him a question, nobody asked him why or what or where or look. So it was a done deal, and that's not acceptable where you're just wrong. And I think someone said to me, of the 40 that'll be 49 hearings, only 3 have been successful, which is fair enough. If I'd have a serious problem with people appealing when it's a red card. I had it in Offaly, and I had a couple of clubs onto me in my early days, and I gave them no hop. I said, I have nothing to do with the CCC, but I said, I will comment on the case that you're at, because I was at the match. It was a red card. And someone else rang me, it was. And when they are red, I hate people going and appealing cards that are red. It's crazy, and it's not on. But this was clearly not a red card. And I just don't, that's what makes me so mad, that there was no, there is no, we could have went further with it, but we decided there's a league final coming up. Let's get this over for James's sake, for the team's sake, for the under-20s next Tuesday night. He'll go and play with them. But I do feel he's the victim here of a wrong decision. And look, it's over now. You can't keep going on about it and probably get a bit of life out of this again. But it's just one of those things that it makes me very annoyed that you can't, that people won't accept that there's a mistake made and just move. And I think they would get so much respect for it if they did that.
Yeah, just lastly on that point, that would be after the fact. So after he's sent off, the result of the game has been affected by that. Is there anything that you would suggest or for actually dealing with it there and then, given, like, I don't know, people have said about VAR or a TMO or something like that? Because it's all grand saying, yeah, it wasn't a red card and he's off for the next game, but just say that's an All-Ireland final the last day, and it doesn't really matter that his red card has been rescinded. We lost the game on that day. How would you try and deal with it there and then, or would you have any ideas that happen?
Well, I wrote about this years ago. I had an idea that it may be like tennis, that you could maybe get a number of calls, like you get 3 in a tennis match, let it be 2 in a big match. Now, I know that Hawkeye, that was maybe even pre-Hawkeye, but particularly in the big matches, I say, I don't think you're going to get this in every ground. It's a bit like even the clock hooter system now is only going to be, I think, for televised matches initially, because it's a job to roll it out and all that type of stuff. So I think something like that, if you had a couple of calls a game that you could go back and look at. The question though, in that situation, would the TMO in that situation go against the referee and the linesman? Like everyone else had a couple of weeks to go and look at it, or a week, sorry. And they had, like, we had video evidence, we had all our clips put together, we had the whole thing, which very clearly showed that James Mann did not touch Gavin Fives' head. And he actually dipped his shoulder to make sure he didn't. When he went to go through the tackle, and he dipped out of it. He actually, instead of going up with the shoulder, went down with the shoulder. So it was completely like he couldn't have done any more from a sporting point of view, and like he was standing his ground. He went to go through a gap. He stood his ground, but he actually dipped his shoulder and kept his elbow down and never moved his feet. And he actually slowed up going into the tackle. So, like, you know, if he wanted to do him, for want of a better word, and we all know what that means, they played hurling, he would have been going into that tackle in a completely different frame of mind and physically in a different way. He would have been going at him instead of dipping away and slowing up. So anyway, Michael, answer your question, something like that might have a part to play, you know, even one, but it's getting it, where do you do it, where do you not do it, what matches, and who's going to be adjudicating. See, we're all amateurs. See, this is the difficulty. We're a small country and we all know each other. And if you're a referee, the referees will think, like, not anti-referee, I think it's an awful hard job. And I think to do, and I think primarily do very, very well. Like, it's like football. Look at the difference in football now that the dissent has gone out of it and that. Like, that'll surely have to come in hurling.
Yeah.
Mightn't suit me great sometimes, but genuinely, look what's happened. It's just, and we just tap and go and it's gone. And there's no time to argue with anyone or do anything. It's just, and it's completely transformed the game back into a huge spectacle. So, but if you cut that out and, you know, that even that dissent piece, it'll help refs. But I have a lot of respect for refs. They have a very, very difficult job. Split moment. I don't know if you ever refed a match. I refed a few underage matches. It's very, very difficult. So that's why I'm saying, you know, I'd have a sympathy if that mistake was made live on the spot. But Jesus, lads, put your hands up and say it was a mistake.
Yeah, 100%. How do you see that game going at the weekend, Michael? It's very hard to gauge anything off the Watch Park game. I thought Offaly actually fought brilliantly well, considering they were down to 14 for 3/4 of the game. Probably tired at the end a bit. It's going to be it's an interesting game. Like, we're going in, Offaly are going in as underdogs or whatever. Waterford seem like they're getting nearly everybody back just at the right time with Munster on the horizon. They had a terrible start to the league and losing that game down to Carlow, but they've bounced back fairly brilliantly. How do you see it going?
Yeah, well, I think that Carlow game, to be fair, Waterford, I don't know, number of the team that they have now, so they've got a lot of players back as the league has gone on. I think that strength and depth you talk about is a factor. They brought on a lot of subs, and there's no disrespect to the Offaly subs, but we've quite a few injuries at the minute, and some of them are the younger players that are tied up in under 20 as well. Like, if you take Adam Screeney, hasn't trained with Offaly this year yet. Shane Rigney hasn't come onto the panel because of injuries. Duignan pulled his hamstring again last week, and it just brings me on to another issue, and that Evan Kelly's out long term, but, like, you know, that's James Mahon being suspended. You know, they're all players that would be featuring, I think, in a league final, in an open game with 20 to go. And I think the Waterford subs made it. So I think that will be a big help to Waterford. But just on that, on those injuries, Michael, you know, the split season, it's brilliant from a club player's point of view to know where they are and what they're doing and what's happening. But for the county player, I think things, if anything, have got worse for the county player. The demands on them to get a week or two off, maybe a week off from their club when they're finished and they're back into it again. And you take Adam, Ben Keneally and Shane Rigney. The three of them had this osteopubis injury. They picked that up with their clubs. They left Offaly. We have a fantastic medical setup. Duignan, they were all fully fit. Now, lads can get injured. I'm not being critical of the clubs here, but they got injured with their clubs. And in the three lads' cases with the osteopubis, they played the entire season injured. Whenever they got injured, they played on. Adam played right through a number of matches. I think it was against Coolderry in the county semi-final. He got injured. He played the rest of that game. He played a county final. He played a Leinster campaign. And then he went on and played a couple of under 20 matches. And he came back to Offaly then and hasn't trained once or fully with Offaly still. So, and we look after players. I'm not talking about Offaly rehabbing them, but Ben was the very same with Rhinus. Shane Rigney was the same with Rhinus. We rehabbed her right throughout the winter as well. Got him 100% back, cleared to play. And simple going through in the game and training the other night, just change direction, take a shot, and the hamstring went again, which is very frustrating for him and for everyone. But it is a factor. And if you notice, last November there was a month where players weren't to train. We observed that. Like players did a bit in their own or whatever, just to give them mentally and physically a rest. A lot of the country didn't, and I'm again annoyed about that, because if that's scrapped and the pre-season competitions come back in, it's putting more and more pressure on these good players. The lads are getting on to the latter stages of the championship with their clubs, etc., etc. Huge demand on them. But anyway, to go back to your point,
what you're saying is that for a lot of the inter-county cohort, the schedule is kind of relentless and it doesn't stop.
It's worse, because and the only hope to have is that November month, if everybody observes it, because someone that has a long run with their club, if they don't have, it's not as bad if you get knocked out at an earlier stage. But if you go on at all into it, it's nearly straight back into the county then again and on again, and you maybe get 2 weeks at Christmas or a week. It's not even 2, whatever it is. So you have, like, and we're very mindful of that. I've been very strong on that, even with, say, Mickey Hart coming in this year as a new manager, wanting that month in November to train and saying, no, Mickey, we're not breaching it, because the medical is there, the mental side of it is there. All these surveys have been done, and players are suffering badly because of it, and we're pushing them too hard, and we have to give them a few weeks off. But also the clubs, when they go back to clubs, they're after having a long season, and then they're straight back into the club. And then if they get injured, they feel that they've been away from their club for so long that they have to totally show loyalty to their club, and they're playing away. And I knew Ben Keneally was injured, watching him one day, and I was talking to his father, and he said, yeah, he has this thing, but sure, he has to play. But you don't really have to play. But they want, see, it's tough. But then they're out injured, and everyone thinks then they're injured playing for Offaly. Like Adam, there's too many under-20s playing with the seniors and all that. None of it has anything to do. Like Johnny and Leo have a great relationship in terms of how they manage the players. Once they hit the GPS, they hit their load for the week, they're stood down. Once they hit, it's managed brilliantly. But loose talk then can start about lads getting injured, and that doesn't help. Doesn't help when you're trying to manage it over the next few weeks in particular, because we're going to have, next week the under-20s are playing Tuesday and Saturday. Then when we start Leinster Championship, it could be Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, depending how we go. If we get a bit of a run the under-20s, so it's not easy, and it's hard, and it's hard on the lads.
Yeah. Sorry, we broke away to something there. I think I was asking you for a prediction.
I was just trying to get away from that. No, I think Offaly will play well. I think they'll play very well. Maybe Waterford's, like Ty de Burke is back. They're still down a number of players. Like if you actually went through like who they could have had against us down in Waterford, the Mikey Kyles, the Austin Gleasons, there was a number of them still. Either Patrick or Parry Fitzgerald. One of the Fitzgeralds was missing. And a number of other players. But I think Offaly will have taken a bit of confidence. It was a very bad day down there. Like the conditions were terrible. Wind and rain and everything else. So I think the better conditions will suit everybody that bit better. And Desi was kept quiet. Will he be as quiet again? All those type of questions. So look, I'd love Offaly to win, but maybe if I can put on my analyst hat, I'd have to say probably Waterford are that bit further ahead. And I've kind of thought the last few years there were kind of dark horses to get out of Munster and to make a big drive, and maybe different things have just gone against them with injuries, and a few players went away, but they all seem to be back and buying into Peter Queally big time, and he's a huge Waterford man, and I think you can see that they're really pulling together. So you probably have to fancy Waterford with the strength and depth that I mentioned.
Just the last one, Michael. You said you were chatting to our El Presidente the other day. Any conversation come up about the lack of respect for some of hurling's lower tiers, particularly last weekend?
I did speak to him about it. Yeah, there was a number of things. That was one of them. I think that obviously the distribution of the tickets for Páirc Uí Chaoimh was sort of mentioned. I think the ticket increases for the Munster Championship. I mentioned that. Like they were 25 quid 2 years ago. They're for €35. That's a tenner. Like what's a tenner? You can say it's 40% increase on €25. That's what it is in tough times. Like $5 here, $5 there. But what it'll do is people. I always said this, and there was a central council meeting in October, and Tom Ryan gave a presentation about attendances and about ticket prices. And I spoke about the Leinster final, Joe McDonough double header last year, where there was 30,000 people, and I said, with respect, and now in fairness to Jared, he has set up a ticketing group to look at ticketing, and in fairness to him, and he's aware of all these things. Look, he's very tuned into the grassroots, but Tom Ryan gave the presentation, and I spoke, maybe the only one to speak at the meeting, to say that we should be looking to sell out those days, no more than last Sunday's league football finals. Get kids in, give them free tickets, go into the schools. Like Dublin were in that Leinster final against Kilkenny. I'd be going into every school in Dublin and giving them tickets and making their parents bring them.
Yeah.
And looking at concessions and and if you fill Crow Park, and whether you get in much more money or not, but you're building an interest and the love of the game and all that sort of stuff, that look, maybe people think I'm nuts to be talking about these things like this.
I don't think just even the league increase, like kids having to pay into the league, like you're actually deterring some people from bringing kids to a game. Like surely that should never be the case. And it's you could be rolling on a hill like we were down in Borough for years. You're barely even taking account of a match, but then eventually you get sucked in and you want to be on and you want to be playing. You know, but that'll only happen if you're there.
Well, see, look, we had a very strict. We wouldn't charge any under 16s, but if you take the league this year, it was €12 and free in for under 16s for the football, and it was 20 quid and £5 for kids for the hurling, because we're in Division 1. We had two different regimes for the same county. Anyway, but like it was full price for Hogan stand ticket for a child last week, but it could go to the Davin or the Cusick for a £5, if you're under 16. Like I'd be just saying, fill it up, let the kids in, or charge them a £5. Like I have no problem with I think anyone to go to a national final for a £5 for an under 16 is fine. Maybe like you can take a view on it, but for ordinary league matches or whatever. But there's loads of ways of going about it. And one of my arguments has been that we seen that the attendance were falling. Now they picked up, I'd say, in the league because the football's been better. But last year I think they were down 10% on the previous year. And the answer is to put up the prices to balance the books. That's not the answer. The answer is to get more people to go. I know we've streaming and that, but you'll eventually kill the golden goose, like putting up a £5 here, another £5. So a family will say 35. Now, it's very clever. Another way, you put out demand for Munster hurling is so strong, and you put them all out and create that buzz, and they're sold out. At €35. So it's clever marketing. It's good from a money point of view, but it's not the right thing. You shouldn't be putting up tickets €10 over a 2-year period.
Yeah, no, agreed. And just even like the cost of the £5 for 4 games might affect you going to a Munster final. Do you know what I mean? There's your extra bit gone, or whatever bit of discretionary income you have, because it's tight enough as it is for everybody at the moment. You know what I mean? But Michael, you've been super with your time, and Matt, thanks a million. And hopefully, hopefully we're competitive on Sunday anyway. It'll be 2 very, very good games, and maybe we might be smiling Sunday evening. Either. Hopefully it'll be competitive. And just one question actually here. Sorry, not a question. Paul Young, next president of the GAA, he says. Michael Duignan, any interest?
Is that Paul Young, the singer?
It could well be.
I don't think, Michael, I tell you, I'm going to be straight with you here. I'm 50, just what age am I? 57 or 58? But I'm born in 68. I'm 57, 58 on my next birthday. I suppose I've never been out of the GAA, and I've said many times I'm going to take a back seat here or there, like since I started playing at 5 or 6 or 7, like us all, and then went on and played, and then got into training young lads, and then got into administration of the club nearly by accident, and then nearly got into this by accident, or the chairman of Offaly. And I'm still on Central Council, and I'm back now with the club again. And it's been a long haul. Now, I love it to an extent, but I'm busy in work. And like at some stage, and I look at, I'm not martyr here, but like my business would have suffered a fair bit over the 5 years that and I'm looking towards retirement now and everything else. And I don't take money. I don't take expenses from Offaly. I don't take, for anything I do. So, so like I have a few years left to probably look after myself and look after the future, and going down the road of like, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, like it's very political, and I would have to do a lot of traveling and a lot of promoting yourself and traveling the length and breadth of Ireland to every county, and it wouldn't really be my scene, to be honest with you. If it could just go, if everyone and say, put your name forward and say against yourself and Stapleton or anybody else, I'd say
I'd say you get it then in that case.
Not getting that in that one, but if you could go forward and just say, look, I have an interest for these reasons, and have a short presidential campaign, nearly like the politics, where you go and put your name forward and spend 3 or 4 months canvassing. But this starts years ago, or it might be now for 5 or 6 years down the road if you were going to go there. And look, it's obviously, as a GAA man, it would never have been on my agenda. I was playing was my most important thing then, maybe coaching and whatever, but playing was but Offaly was always my number one passion. And I don't think I'd have the same passion for the rest of it. I have an opinion, I suppose, on everything, and I think I could improve things genuinely. But I have an opinion, which is a good thing to have, and you don't have to agree with it. And I've no problem if someone doesn't agree with it, even in the strongest possible way. We're all big boys, but so I'd say the answer is no. But as a good friend of mine told me not too long ago, never rule anything out fully, because you never know if you change your mind, or So I'm not saying 100% no, but it wouldn't be on my agenda at the minute.
100%. Well, I don't think you ever thought you were going to be Offaly chairman either. So you just never
I don't think any of you did anyway.
No, probably not. Michael, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. Your pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great to have Michael on board there. Great old chat. And obviously, two brilliant finals to look ahead to at the weekend. Just one quick one, actually, with a viewer comment in a couple of weeks ago, just saying about maybe throwing in the odd bet here and there. And we're obviously sponsored by Lotto Land as well. Just something I kind of saw yesterday, and I really liked the look of it. It's actually Down or 25-1 to win the Joe McDonagh Cup. Down, who won the 2A at the weekend against, or the Division 2 at the weekend against Kildare. Kildare are actually half their price in the McDonagh, and then you have Kerry, and you obviously have Westmeath, Laois and Carlow. Now I think Carlow are the most likely winners, but at 25-1, third of the odds, I think Down have a shot at getting to a McDonagh final, and I think you could do a hell of a lot worse. If they got to the final, you get paid 8-1. If they won, you'd get paid 25-1. I think you could do a hell of a lot worse than have a small little interest in Down's fortunes in the McDonagh. And obviously the other finals over the weekend as well. Mayo ended London's unbeaten streak in the Division 3 final, played in Hawkfield, which I'd have a big issue with. It's a training centre, and the pitch wouldn't have been in a hectic state either. And obviously Division 2 final was played in Skeen with no 65-yard lines, which is a joke really. And then Division 4 final finished louder, the winners. A couple of Offaly faces there, actually. Conor Clancy from Michael Duignan's native club, St. Rynas, was the captain, and Leon Fox from Belmont was centre back as well. They had a good win over Fermanagh as well. But we want to see hurling front and centre and been in bigger venues, maybe even the curtain raiser or a pre-curtain raiser to a bigger game, give them the sort of status that they deserve. I'm not saying these games should be in Croke Park, far from it. I'm not even sure if the Division 3, 4 and 1 and 2 football finals should be in Croke Park, but play them somewhere where you pack out a good provincial venue, real good surface, real good atmosphere, etc. That's kind of what I'd be looking at. But we're going to chat a bit more football now with Adam Moynihan. Delighted to have Adam on board as always every week. Adam, how are you doing?
Good, Verney. How are you keeping?
Good. Sad times down in your native Kerry, Adam. We were just chatting off air before we started. Like, as icons in the GAA go, they don't really get much bigger.
Yeah, look, Miko O'Dwyer was it's hard to put into words how big a figure he was and how much he meant to all of us down here, and not only here in Kerry, obviously, look all over Ireland, for his stints at Wicklow and Kildare and Laois and Clare. Look, he just meant an awful lot to an awful lot of people, and look, particularly down here, look, obviously football is so important to us. Wherever we go in the world as Kerry people, the Kerry football team it's a badge of honour for us. It's a very big part of our identity. The fact that Kerry football has been successful, it kind of rubs off on us and it gives us confidence on an individual level. Do you know what I mean? It's a huge source of pride for us. And a lot of that stems from the golden years and that team and that, that iconic run that they had in the 70s and 80s. And Miko was obviously the architect behind all that. And look, we owe him so much, and Kerry football wouldn't be what it is without him. I think we as Kerry people wouldn't be what we are without him as well. And look, he was the greatest Kerry man of our time, as far as I'm concerned, and what he did for our county will never be forgotten.
The twinkle in the eye, Adam, was something. He just had a twinkle in his eye. You just knew he was a bit of a rogue, bit of a devil character. Like, he just always had that. Pat Cash Healy, the photographer, tells a great story about scoring, I don't know, it was a 2-5 or something like that in some league game. I forget who it was against. I'm going to say it was Listowel, shall we say. And the horse Kennelly kind of goaded Pat into ringing Miko O'Dwyer to say that he should be on the Kerry panel. And Miko answered the phone or whatever. And he says, "Well, I tell you what, young Healy," said at the end of it all, if Kerry are ever playing the Stole, I'll give you a ring. You know what I mean? Just he's a massive, massive character. I'm sure that God only knows the amount of stories down around, you know, Waterville and etc. about Miko.
Yeah, look, that was one of my, not that I knew the man, I wasn't fortunate enough to get to know him, but just every story you hear about him, he was a rogue, he was rebellious, he would stand up to authority, he'd stand his own ground, and there was always a bit of messing in him, always a bit of diddlement. One of the best stories I ever heard about him was, I heard this from Michael O'Connell, who was the head of Adidas in Ireland during the 70s and 80s, and obviously Miko got a kind of controversial deal with Adidas at the time that was worth about £20,000, and the GAA weren't too happy about it. Obviously, the GAA wanted Kerry to wear O'Neill's or an Irish brand, and it was the night before an All-Ireland final, and this is according to Michael O'Connell himself. The GAA arrived out to the Grand Hotel in Malahide, where Kerry were staying. They were playing Roscommon the following day in the final, and they arrived out with a bag of O'Neill's gear, and green and gold O'Neill's gear, and they said, right, you're wearing this gear tomorrow or the game isn't going ahead. So Miko said, right, look, give me the gear, and he took the gear off him. There was a locker in the corner of the room. Miko threw the gear into the locker, and he said, right, we'll have a meeting, right? We'll get back to you and we'll let you know. So the GAA contingent left, or they'd done their bit, whatever. They walked out. Miko went over, locked the cupboard that the gear was in, walked over to the window, threw the keys out the window, turned around to the selectors that were with him and said, right, are we going out there looking for the keys? Or are we going to talk about the match? And that was the end of it. They went out the following day wearing Adidas gear, and I think they got fined £500, and they made 20 grand off Adidas. So he was a shrewd businessman. There's no doubt about that.
There's a great one as well. It was only when you were mentioning Adidas there that I thought of it. There was a famous advertisement, like one of the most famous advertisements was the Kerry team, none of them fully clothed, standing in front of a Bendex washing machine, and the advertisement appeared the morning of an All-Ireland final. Like, it was completely different and outside of the box, nearly everything he did.
Yeah, that was 1985, I think, and there was war over that. Like, if that happened today, even you'd be like, that's a bit much. Like, but I think the tagline was, only Bendix could whitewash this lot. It's a class poster, like, yeah. The boys standing around their jocks, like, it's a whole. But yeah, look, he was way ahead of his time and everything. The way he trained the team, his attitude towards tactics, like, he was a player's manager. He always wanted the best for his players. He wanted them well looked after, and yeah, he was just so far ahead of his time.
Yeah, and even like, obviously unbelievable results in Kerry, like ending, I think it was a 57-year famine. Was it in Laois? It was a fair famine. He ended in Kildare. Well, I don't know if you saw, I shared it there earlier, Glenn Ryan's speech after winning the Leinster final. Like, it's just, I'm not from Kildare or anything like that, and even getting goosebumps talking about it. You just see the love they had for him, and even in Wicklow as well. Remember the qualifier runs? Wicklow got to the last 12, I think, one year, which would have been unheard of. I think he had 100 for trials in Wicklow. They were nearly like open trials, and everyone and anyone came to try and impress Miko. Like, and the one thing I would associate with all of his teams, they believed that they were invincible almost. He built them up, and they totally believed the hype, and they nearly outperformed themselves as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he just had this aura about him, I'd say, that was just like, Miko's here now, we can do anything. Do you know, that kind of way? Like, you mentioned it there, like Laois, 57 years without a Leinster title, and I think it was 42 for Kildare. Like, that's phenomenal. And to do it, like, that's within 5 years of each other, to do both of those things. And Wicklow as well, he brought them on loads. Like, his record with Kerry, I think it was it, well, obviously he had in 12 years, there was 10 All-Ireland final appearances, and 8 All-Ireland wins, 55 games in championship, 43 wins. Like, it's just like the greatest Gaelic football manager of all time, you know. And yeah, look, he just had that magic touch, but it was all about his passion for the game, his infectious attitude. And I think as well, just he was cute. Like, he's the archetypal cute Kerry whore. Like, you know, he just had everything figured out, and he was one step ahead of everybody else.
Even he said at one stage during his Kerry reign, they trained 27 nights in a row, and not one person missed a night. It's different type of times, and it's funny. Like, I remember Eugene McGee did something similar in Offaly. They weren't all like, you know, dogged training sessions or anything like that, but it was a different kind of a time. And obviously we have the old 5 in a row ovary, but get like probably the best achievement of that team was coming back and winning another 3. And people forget about O'Dwyer. Actually, funny enough, Wishy Fogarty, the late great Wishy Fogarty, described him as the GA's Muhammad Ali to me when we did a Miko at 80 supplement 8 years ago. But he just that ooze charisma, just ooze kind of class as well. Even that great picture, I don't know if you saw it at the filling station. Wasn't there an O'Dwyer's filling station in Waterville?
Yeah, it actually, I think it had his full name above it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just class. Yeah, and he obviously took the Bomber from obscurity. I think he said the Bomber lost. What his quote was something like, "The Bomber was a good man for eating Mars bars." He wasn't.
Yeah, and Smarties. Yeah.
Yeah, Smarties. Yeah. He
Yeah.
helped him to lose like 5 stone, and then went on to have one of the greatest careers of them all. Like,
Yeah, sure. That was, I think, 78 was the Bombers' first year, and like people forget as well all the success that he had. A bit like Ferguson with United, he was nearly gotten rid of before it all even started. Like he won his first year in '75. He won it kind of against the head with a young team in '75 against Dublin. They had kind of bad enough defeat in '76 and '77, and going into '78, it was a case of like if they don't win it this year, like he was going to be gone. Like as kind of Kerry can be kind of ruthless in that regard, but they got to the final. As you said, he discovered the Bomber. It was the final, of course, with that famous Mikey Sheehy goal over Paddy Cullen. The Bomber got a hat trick in the second half.
Like after just back at the morning, Jesus Christ, like he was on fire.
Yeah, it was hilarious. Like the third goal, like, and he just it's popped up at the back post, and you see these ones not tapped in. He went up, and it was like a volleyball spike, like he just bombed it in. But yeah, look, that was the start of it. And like if he didn't win that game, he could have been gone. And you're talking about another 6 All-Irelands maybe wouldn't have happened. But even though the team was great, but yeah, he just had that aura about him. I read Eamon Fitzmaurice's piece in the Examiner today. I'd recommend anyone to read it. It was absolutely brilliant. I was thinking of writing something myself, but there was actually no point after reading Eamon's because it was just perfect. Like it was a beautiful piece. But he talked about that time. You mentioned the photo there with himself and his wife outside the filling station in Waterville. Look, he's looking fairly dashing. And Eamon Fitzmaurice tells the story that like Paul Galvin used to love Miko, and Paul used to call down to the house a lot. Like Paul is obsessed with that, the history of Kerry football, and all those guys mean a lot to him. So Paul used to call down to him, and obviously Paul's involved in fashion now, and he said, "Geez, Miko, like if you were in your pomp these days, like you'd be modeling my stuff." Like, and apparently Miko loved it, and Miko used to tell everyone, "I just love the idea of Miko in his 70s and 80s telling everyone that Paul Galvin said he could be a model." It just sums him up, like the kind of messing that he'd be doing. But yeah, look, it's hard to put into words really, and obviously your heart goes out to the family and his friends and all those players that he coached over the years, because they all have so much time for him.
Even when he was announced, I don't even know if you remember this, when he was announced as Wicklow manager, there was a big press conference up in the Westbury Hotel in Dublin, and like he was up the top table. It was ridiculous. Like you wouldn't see it for the announcement of an Ireland football manager. It was crazy. Like he was just box office, and he just knew how to get people talking as well, get tongues wagging, and immediately the buzz was there around Wicklow. Whereas most county managers now, they're trying to like not kill the buzz, but they're trying to not build it up. Whereas he was like, build it up, like, get everyone hyped, get everyone excited or whatever. That was just another great kind of memory. Just a quick one, Adam. We were talking briefly off air. We might as well try and assemble it, like, because he's definitely one of the heads on an all-time GAA Mount Rushmore. And I'm not just talking about managers here. I'm talking about all-time. I think he's firmly in as one of those kind of 4 spots. Who are the other kind of figures that we're talking about if we're saying an all-time GAA Mount Rushmore?
I suppose I can't pick 4 Kerrymen, no.
No, you could try, but you won't be successful.
No, look, I suppose if you Miko down as the best football manager, you have to have Cody in as well as the best hurling manager, like as he's just an automatic. What he achieved with Kilkenny down through the years. After that, look, I suppose, and you mentioned it off air as well, you have Christy Ring up there as one of the most iconic. He's just, for a guy that, it's a long time ago now that he was playing, but he's still very much in the consciousness. He's still very much that kind of iconic figure that has kind of stood the test of time and that people still talk about in glowing terms. After that, I think it's quite difficult to nail it down. Maybe it's one to ask our viewers. Like, I'm sure they'll have good ideas for who would be there. But yeah, what do you think yourself?
Yeah, I think Henry Shefflin would be right up there. I would have Ring firmly in that number 3 spot. Like, as what are you talking about? Sports people down in Cork. You're looking at Roy Keane, Christy Ring, Jimmy Barry Murphy would be the three probably that would jump off the page to me. Henry Shefflin would be a potential fourth. We had a couple of comments in there. Pat Spillane, obviously the most decorated. He's the most decorated footballer in All-Star history, I think, isn't he? With 9, I think he is. Porter says Cody, TJ, Mick Mackey is mentioned there as well. Obviously, Limerick hurling icon. They obviously have that great picture of Mackey and Ring when Ring is coming off in a sling after, I think, a Munster final. Mackey's doing umpire actually. I'd probably go for Shefflin, but not with the same conviction that I would go for the other three, shall we say. I think it's a lot more maybe open-ended than maybe the other three. I think the other three are kind of cut and dry.
Yeah, I would say for equality, if we're going to have 2 hurlers, we have the 2 footballers as well, or 2 football men. So if you're getting Ring and Shefflin in there, I think we have to get a footballer in there. I don't know. Look, it's maybe I'm nearly sorry for saying it before I say it, but like the Dublin team of the last decade are one of the best teams of all time, and maybe it's a bit recent. And you think of the legendary fellas that going back to 50 years ago or more that come to mind first. But would a player from that, if we're asking this question in 20 years' time, I'm sure someone from that Dublin team would be very firmly in people's minds for that. Like maybe, I don't know, a Fenton, someone like that, as a Gaelic footballer. I think, to be fair to them, it's not often I give Dublin credit, but you would have to give that team credit, to be fair.
Yeah, Brian Fenton will be right up there. James McCarthy, Cluxton, P-Well74 mentions Heffo, obviously, yeah. Michael Duignan mentioned Jim Gavin. As regards influence on the GAA, he obviously had a massive influence, and he was involved in the first ever 5 in a row football team. But even this FRC thing, and God only knows what he might do in time as well. He might go back into management, you just never know. But he could be, he's the ringleader basically in changing the rules of football and potentially reinventing a game that was not dying out, but there was definitely a staleness to it, shall we say. He's reinvigorated as well. So Gavin wouldn't exactly be a million miles away. John Doyle is mentioned as well for obviously his part in Tipperary's famous Hell's Kitchen back in the 60s. I think we should leave the 4th spot open. We might come back. We might come back to it next week. We'll have a good think about it. So we have Cody, Ring, and we have Micko. And you're pushing for a footballer. It's probably only right that there is a footballer, so we'll have maybe a chat about who the 4th person will be on the Mount Rushmore next week. Adam, obviously, just looking back at last weekend, the Division 1 final was a bit underwhelming, to say the least. A good win for Kerry, and obviously Paddy Clifford's stock has gone even higher, but it was a poor spectacle, never really got going. He thought Mayo, when they got back from 8-3, maybe then it might get going, but they never really rose a gallop, did they?
No, they were disappointing, to be fair. I don't think Kerry, even though they won by 6 points, I don't think they were really as good as they were, we'll say, in the previous weeks against Galway and Armagh. I think that they won't be, I'm sure that they'll be considering the fact that they won't win All Ireland playing the way they did against Mayo, I'll put it that way. But it was enough to beat Mayo. I thought from Mayo, they've been very inconsistent. They've had good days and they've had bad days. But what worried me about them the other day was that it was sort of the same problem that you would associate with Mayo teams down through the years. It was a lot of, when it came down to dependency on 1 or 2 fellas to put the ball over the bar. They were, every time they went into the Kerry's 45, they're great at doing these hard runs off the shoulder, and they run at angles, and it's back and forth, and it's frantic. And as I suppose, as a supporter of the other team, you're going, geez, we're under pressure here. We're being dragged all over the place. When it comes to actually having an opening and backing yourself to put the ball over the bar, I think they don't have enough players who will do that. Still, it's still a complaint with them. They're still waiting for Ryan O'Dwyer to come in the loop. They're still waiting for maybe a Jordan Flynn to put it over the bar or someone like that. So I think, look, I wouldn't they have Sligo now this weekend. You'd obviously expect them to win that game. It might not be easy, but you'd expect them to win that game. They're still capable of taking a scalp later in the year. I wouldn't be writing them off. They could still be in the conversation, in June and July. But
it's hard winning 2 or 3 big games in a row, though. Is it at that knockout stage?
That's the thing. The consistency, you can see them beating, I don't know, like one of the teams maybe you consider in the top 5 at the moment. You could see them catching someone on the hop in a quarterfinal, but it's just the way things are now. They'd have to improve an awful lot before they'd beat, like you said, like 3 of those top teams in a row. There's definitely, at the moment, you'd have to say there's probably five teams ahead of them. Maybe well, 6 is a bit harsh. I know they got to a league final, but like it's tough to see them beating, for example, I don't know, a Donegal and an Armagh and a Kerry, or like a Donegal and a Dublin and whoever else. Like, so they've work to be done. Look, it's only April. There's still time to kind of come back into it. But look, from a Kerry point of view, Kerry will take that. Obviously, we spoke last week about Jack O'Connor's record of winning All Irelands and how they're always preceded by league finals. So here we go. No, but look, I think things are looking decent for Kerry. For me, it's the squad is looking as strong as it has looked in a while. So there's no one getting carried away down here. The next step now is the Munster semi-final, presumably against Cork in a couple of weeks' time. But look, things are a lot more positive than they were maybe a month ago down here.
What's the prognosis on Dermot O'Connor, Adam, and Seanie O'Shea? What's the timeline to return for those 2 guys like?
Yeah, so I think Dermot is hopefully going to be okay for that Munster semi-final. It was a shoulder injury against it was towards the end of the Armagh game, and it was a big worry at the time. He looked to be in a lot of pain. He has some big falls. Like, he kind of goes up high, and I'm not sure, is he getting hit in the air? Does he have to work on the way he's landing or something? But he does seem to land quite heavily on himself quite a lot. But the scan, well, I don't think it came back totally clear, but it came back in a positive enough sense that it's not going to be a medium to long-term injury. They're talking about him being okay for the Munster semi-final. Seanie O'Shea, likewise, I think the impression that I'm getting, well, it's a knee ligament injury that's kind of lingering, but the impression I was getting is that he was kind of holding himself off, and they were holding him off. If it was an All-Ireland final, maybe on last weekend, maybe he could have togged out, maybe. But certainly the talk is that he should be okay for Munster. And look, the problem now for Jack is that, not that it's a bad problem to have, but how is he going to work that when Paddy's playing so well as centre forward? Is Paddy going to have to go to the wing? I know positions don't mean that much anymore, and they're both going to drop back and they're both going to get on ball, but it's definitely a question to be asked. And but look, obviously there is some talk down here. It's like, geez, Paddy's going well. Like, what are we going to do with Seanie? But like, Seanie O'Shea plays obviously 100% of the time. So they'll both be fitted in somewhere there. As I said, it's a nice problem for Jack O'Connor to have.
It's a very good problem to have. Just looking at a couple of bits of other news. Peter Cook is back in the Galway squad, which is a big boost for them. And by all accounts, John Small was on the Dublin training camp in Portugal as well. Like, considering what they've lost with, saying, retirements of Fenton, Fitzsimons, McCarthy, Mannion and McCaffrey, he is a crucial player. He's not your big, high-profile 6 all-star player or anything like that, but having someone at the rock of your defence, and he's teeth tough, he's hard to get around, and I'm sure he must be a good talker and a good communicator, because the Dublin defence is always a hell of a lot tighter when he's in it. That's a very important player for Dessie Farrell to get back.
Oh, definitely. Like those fellas don't come around too often. Like, fellas you can depend on like that are that tough, that can nearly mark anyone, that are leaders from a defensive part area of the field. I think that's huge for Dublin. They've obviously lost an awful lot, as you said, and they've got good players all over the pitch. But having someone with that experience and that, as you said, that kind of physical presence, like, he's a good man to lay down a marker if it needs to be laid down. Do you know what I mean? Like, he won't back down from anyone.
Opposition fans don't like, and I mean exactly. That in a positive light for him. Like, you'd love to have him, but you don't like when he's against you. Yeah,
that's probably the best compliment you could pay him. Like that. Like, I tell you, Kerry fans definitely don't like him anyway. We'll put it that way. Like, he does leave something extra on every now and then, but you need fellas like that. Every team needs guys like that are going to go the extra mile or maybe step over the line every now and then. And as I said, lay down a marker. So I think that's a huge thing for Dublin. They do still have, look, they're not going to fill all the gaps that they have left vacant now with all the guys that are missing. But even to fill that one now with a guy of his caliber, I think is huge, and it's a massive boost to Dublin.
The result of the weekend was probably Monaghan winning Division 2, and really good performance, really high scoring performance again. They're awaiting the winners of Donegal and Derry I think it's at home if they play. I think it's at home if they play Donegal. It's away if they play Derry. Clonus would absolutely rocking if that was the case against Donegal. Probably the goods of it. I'm sure you'd have a sellout there as well. Just on that Donegal Derry game, Donegal pulled up the handbrake a small bit towards the end of the league. They've kind of put all their eggs in the one basket, but I don't really see that backfiring against them this weekend. Michael McMullen, the Gaelic Life journalist, had a tweet out just about all the players that Derry are missing. Like obviously Christy McKaig is retired, Brendan Rodgers has a knock, McCluskey has a knock. There's about 7 or 8 more like players that have played in the last couple of years that are all kind of potentially missing or not around. Like Paddy Tally hasn't got much luck, and they're going up to Ballybuffet at the weekend. All signs would suggest that a Donegal win, barring Derry produce something akin to what Donegal produced against them in the corresponding fixture last year.
Yeah, well, like Derry have kind of depended on a kind of small enough pool of players over the last few years. So if they're missing anyone, it's a blow. I think you could see from the fact that they obviously they had a poor league and they lost most of their games, but they were still. It wasn't that they were trying out new fellas. They still had their team there. I think they had maybe more players who started every game than any other team in Division 1. So they had 6 or 7 guys who started every game, which is more than any other team. So you'd be worried about them. No, they're going in with probably very little pressure on them. The expectation is going to be that Donegal are going to win that game. I wonder, like, look, Jim McGuinness is the brains, obviously, but like, is it going to be as simple as Donegal can go flat out at the start of the league and next thing take the foot off the gas and next thing, okay, right, all gas again now and go straight back into it? Maybe there's an opportunity for Derry to catch them on the hop at the start of the game and say, look, some of these guys haven't played the last couple of games or whatever, like, maybe we can tear into them and see what happens. I'm sure that'll be Derry's mindset. But yeah, look, all things being equal on the day, it's hard to look past Donegal. I think beyond that potential Monaghan game, like that could be a real test, and like that might be a really interesting game if that's how it pans out. But I wouldn't foresee any major problems for Donegal. I think they should get through that one.
I think it'd be fascinating if Derry got a bit of a run on them, as you say at the start, and Donegal were left chasing the game. I think that'd be really, really interesting. But I find it hard to see Donegal not getting through there. Plenty of other championship action. It's kind of weird to be talking about nearly the first week in April. We have a couple of games in Leinster. Obviously, you have that Meath and Carlow game. I think Carlow made a really shrewd piece of business getting Joe Murphy in. Cake left on Wednesday night. That was announced there. Joe Murphy announced by Monday evening. He's obviously been heavily involved with the Air Old Club there. He knows the scene on the ground. He's won 3 in a row with Naas the last 3 years. So I think they've done, I think they've been really, really smart. They've got it. It's not often you get potentially a better manager than you had at the start of the year, during the middle of the year. But I think that could be the case there in Carlow, and he might be able to pick things up, even though it's going to be difficult against Meath, who obviously are missing their 2 main coaches as well at the weekend. They walked away last weekend. We've games in Connacht as well. That Mayo Sligo one is interesting. If Sligo can get to the levels they got to maybe against Galway in last year's Connacht game, where they should have beaten them, or even that Tailteann Cup semi-final where they probably should have beaten down maybe in extra time, that'll be interesting. Roscommon are going to Ruislip on Saturday. Galway are going to New York. Not really. It's very, very difficult to foresee anything but significant wins for the 2 big hitters there. And then obviously in Munster as well, you have Limerick and Cork. Limerick will be maybe sniffing something there after a league win last weekend, potentially. You'd still fancy Cork to come through that. Anything else you're looking forward to at the weekend? There's action in all 4 provinces. It's kind of hit us in the face quite quickly, I'd say.
Yeah, it is. It's straight into it. I think just having seen Mayo last weekend, there's a small bit of pressure on them to respond to that, because it was flat. It wasn't, they weren't anywhere near their potential. And going into a championship game against Sligo, like as you mentioned, the Galway game last year, like what was that? That was like a last minute goal, basically, wasn't it? That Galway needed to overcome Sligo. So they're not a bad team. So they'll Mayo will need to really be tuned in and to get back on track there. But apart from that, yeah, I don't foresee any major shocks. I mean, there are some games where maybe the teams are at a kind of a closer level, but in terms of like I think Cork, like, Jesus, surely they'll beat Limerick. No disrespect to Limerick. I know they're on the up and maybe in good form, but you'd be expecting Cork to do that and to advance to play Kerry in the semi-final. But yeah, look, Donegal, as I said, that's an interesting one as well, because we don't know like what kind of momentum are they going to be able to generate from a starting or for a standing start. So yeah, look, it's always exciting. The first week of championship is always exciting. Maybe no games jumping out at me as being, complete humdingers, but you never know. There could be something that kind of catches our eye.
Hopefully there might be a little shock thrown in there, because it does light it up. Even when New York beat Leitrim a couple of years ago, like, we're talking about early April, and it was one of the biggest shocks in the history of the championship, even though it was a city with multiple millions beating a county that's a lot smaller. But you get where I'm coming from. Hopefully after the weekend we might have maybe a bit of an upset on the cards. But Adam, good stuff. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, once again. Delighted to be brought to you by Lotto Land, and we'll be back again next Thursday at 4 o'clock, and you can tune in to us across social media as well. Thanks a million. Cheers, Adam.
Cheers, Bernie.